Today we're going to talk about a problem that a lot of people run into, and that's cooling fans when it has to do with their stepper drivers. Now, a lot of stepper drivers out there require cooling, and you have to place a fan over it, but the problem is a lot of people don't like to work with their G codes in order to deal with it. So I'm going to show you a way within Marlin firmware on how to deal with this. So here's the pinout diagram for the SKR version 1.4. Now I need to point out a couple of things. First, we have our fan 1. And as you can see, it says ground, and it's either 12 or 24 volts. What that means is that it's going to run continuously if you have a fan plugged in with your power supply. On the other one, it says 12 or 24 volts, and then it says 2.3. What that means is that there's a signal pin used to control one side to create the circuit and adjust your power. So it would be this one over here. Now, normally people use that as a cooling fan for their surface when they're printing. Down below here, though, we have obviously our first extruder, which is the hot end 0, and that obviously has a signal pin. And most people will either use that for one extruder or for 3. And what I mean by 3 is a diamond print head. Now, in the other case, we have a second hot end extruder that has a signal pin of 2.4. So this would be a good candidate to use the automated cooling for your steppers. Okay, to start with, to hook these up, we need to hook up the red, which is voltage. So I'm going to slide it in here because I've loosened this already for the example. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to torque it down with the screw. Now I'm going to do the ground wire, which is the exact same process. Now careful, if these wires fray, you're going to have a problem. So make sure that they're nice and taut, or put a ferrule on them to protect them so that you can torque on that instead and not have a random wire. So that's what it's going to look like. So we're all set there. The next thing that we need to do is prepare this to actually load the Marlin firmware. So I'm going to move the jumper over to the jumper space for USB loading for the moment. And then I'm going to attach my USB cable over here. And you may hear a beep on the computer. So to begin with, like always, I'm going to point out that we have firmware.cur on the SD drive for the SKR version 1.4. Now when I say firmware.cur and it's all in capital letters, that was the last firmware loaded. So we're going to go over to VS Code now. And I'm going to load the current version of Marlin firmware that I downloaded and extracted already. So I'm going to click on Explorer. Then I'm going to open the folder. And here's the extracted folder, but you need to go one folder deeper and then say Select Folder. Inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the source folder, then the core folder, then boards.h. And inside here, we're going to search on SKR. And as you can see, here's the board that we're currently working with, being board underscore BTT underscore SKR underscore V1 underscore 4. So we're going to copy that. Now I need to point out that the chipset that we're working with on this board is the LPC 1768. If you're working with the turbo, it would be down here, and your chipset would be the LPC 1769. So we're going to close out of boards and the core and source folder, and we're going to go over to configuration.h and do a search on motherboard. And we're going to highlight board underscore ramps underscore 14_EFB and paste what we just copied. And that is our board that we're working with. So I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to change the serial port to -1. And then I'm going to do a search on the A4988, which will bring us to our steppers. And because we're working with the X stepper and the Y stepper, we need to remove the comments. And because our chipset is the DRV8825 for our steppers, I'm going to paste those over the A4988s. Next, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to change the default access steps per unit to 400. And if you don't know why I'm doing this, I suggest watching my tutorial on the A4988 and the DRV8825 to understand why I'm doing this. So now that that's changed, what we need to do is go over to configuration_advanced.h. And I need to search on fan controller, so it's control fans. So control, and then it says controller fan. And what we need to do is we need to remove the comment for use controller fan. We also need to remove the comment for our controller fan pin. So I'm going to backspace to remove that. And right now it's set to -1. So we need to figure out what to do with that. So we're going to go back over to source. Then we're going to go to pins. And we're going to open up the LPC 1768. And we're going to find our board in here, which is the BTT SKR V1_4.h for the pins file. And we're going to search around to see if we can find our pins from earlier before. So I don't actually see it in here, which is kind of odd, but obviously there's a reason why I don't see it. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom and see what's going on. So it says to include pins from pins_BTT_SKR_common.h, which means there's more pins defined that are included in our configuration. So we're going to find that over here and we're going to click on it. Then we're going to scroll down, and as you can see, it's specifying both board types. So that's one of the reasons that this include takes place. So what we have found is that our hot end being our first hot end, not our original one being, this would be our original hot end, and this would be our second one. Our pin is actually called this for our signal pin. So we can close out of here now that we know that, and the pins folder, and then collapse the source, and go back to the advanced configuration. And where it says -1, we're going to paste that pin. Now there's one other thing I want to change, but normally you would not change this, and that is there's extra time that keeps the fan on after you've disabled your motors. Right now it's set to 60 seconds, but for this example, I'm going to change it to 5 so it's shorter to see. So now that we have that configured, we need to go over to platformio.ini, and we need to change the default environment to ours, which would be our chipset. And in this case, it's the LPC 1768. So we're all set there. So now I'm gonna not check the checkbox down here for build, because this either builds or compiles for you. Instead, I'm gonna do the upload, which will upload it to our board on our SD drive. So I'm gonna click this and it will build or compile for us, then upload. Okay, now that the compilation has completed, or the build, you can see that it succeeded in 2 minutes and 39 seconds. And up here, for the LPC 1768, it says success. So we're going to go over to the SD drive on the SKR version 1.4. And as you can see, we have firmware.bin. So in order to load that, being our binary firmware, I'm going to remove the SD or serial, I'm going to remove the serial USB cable. And then I'm going to connect it back up so that it will load the firmware. This may take a few moments. And as you can see now, it does say firmware.cur, which was our current load that took place just a second ago. That's why there's no longer a lowercase firmware.bin. So off camera, I connected up the power supply so that we can actually work with it. It's currently unplugged, but we need to swap back to the direct power. So I'm changing the jumper back to the other two pins, and I'm reconnecting the USB. And now I'm going to plug it in, and this will go right into the wall. But I need to remind you, do not touch the board as it may damage you or your equipment. Okay, I'm in the print run directory for printerface, so I'm going to open up the executable. I'm going to connect to the board, and as you can see right now, it says printer is now online. Just to let you know before I finish this tutorial off, no one is paying me or sponsoring me to do this tutorial, but I will be placing Amazon affiliate links in the description for your convenience. So now that being said, I'm going to show you what happens when you move the stepper 10 steps for the Y-axis, and I want you to watch the fan. So as you can see, the fan is now active. This is what will occur when you move the steppers. Now, when your print normally finishes, what happens is it does a motors off. So I'm going to click that button, and now we'll watch, and 5 seconds later, it should stop on its own, which it appears to be doing. So if you like my tutorial, please press the like button and subscribe, and thank you for your time.